There is a moment that happens to almost everyone who reaches retirement, and almost no one talks about it honestly. It usually arrives a few weeks after the party ends, after the gold watch gets set down somewhere and forgotten, after the calls from old co-workers slow down and then stop. It is the moment you sit in a quiet house on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon and ask yourself a question you were never really prepared for. Who am I, now that nobody needs me to show up anywhere? Most people are told that retirement is a reward. Rest, finally, after decades of effort. But here is what almost nobody mentions before you get there. Rest and disappearance can look identical from the outside, and only you will know, in the quiet of your own mind, which one you are actually living. Before I get to the 7 things on this list, I want to tell you about a Roman senator named Cato. In the final years of his life, at an age when most of Rome assumed his mind had already finished its work, he sat down and began learning Greek, a language he had spent decades publicly mocking as beneath a serious Roman. People laughed at him for it. An old man, hunched over a foreign alphabet, starting from nothing. He did it anyway, and what he proved, without ever meaning to write a philosophy lesson, is the entire idea this video is built on. The mind does not retire unless you personally hand it the papers. The Stoics never separated the mind from the body the way we do now. They treated both as something you train every single day, the same way a blacksmith trains a piece of iron. Stop training it, and it does not stay the same. It softens. Keep training it, and it does not matter how many years it has already lived. It keeps its edge. That is really what this whole video is about. Not 7 ways to fill your afternoons. 7 ways to keep the fire burning that most people quietly let go out the day they clock out for the last time. You have probably heard people use the word neuroplasticity. For a long time, scientists assumed the adult brain, once it reached a certain age, was basically finished growing and changing, set in whatever shape it had settled into. That assumption turned out to be wrong. The brain keeps forming new connections for as long as you keep giving it new problems to actually wrestle with. The Stoics obviously never had that word, but 2,000 years before anyone examined it under a microscope, they had already worked out the practical version of the same idea. Through nothing more than careful observation of their own students and themselves. Stick with me through all 7, because the order matters. And the last one ties everything together in a way I think you will actually feel. Let's start with the first one, writing it down. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth. And somewhere between wars and plagues and the daily grind of governing, he still found a few minutes most nights to write to himself. Not for an audience, not for publication. He had no idea, and probably no intention, that we would ever read a word of it. What we now call meditations was simply a private notebook, the place where an emperor argued with his own mind, questioned his own reactions, and reminded himself, in plain and sometimes blunt language, of what actually mattered. You do not need an empire to do this. You need a notebook and about 10 honest minutes. Write down what actually happened in your day, not the version you would tell a stranger to sound impressive. Write down what irritated you, and ask yourself honestly whether it deserved the size of your reaction. Write down one thing you are grateful for that you would have walked right past a year ago. This is not about producing something beautiful. Marcus never once tried to write beautifully. He wrote true. That is the whole assignment. For a mind that has spent 40 years solving other people's problems and suddenly has fewer problems handed to it, journaling gives your thinking somewhere to go. It slows down the noise in your head enough for you to actually hear it. And there is something quietly powerful about looking back after 6 months and realizing you can trace, in your own handwriting, exactly how your thinking has changed. There is also a quieter benefit nobody warns you about. A lot of people, once the routine of work disappears, feel a kind of loneliness they cannot fully explain, even in a house full of family. A notebook will not replace another person. It was never meant to. But it is somewhere honest to put a thought before it turns into a weight you carry silently all day. Some nights the entry is a single sentence. That still counts. The second one is learning a new language, and this brings us back to Cato. Here is the detail people leave out of that story. Cato did not learn Greek because it came easily to him in old age. It was harder for him than it would have been at 20. His memory did not work the way it used to. He forgot words. He mixed up grammar he should have already known. And he kept going anyway, because he understood something that most people only discover by accident. The struggle of learning is not a sign that you have started too late. It is the actual mechanism by which an aging mind stays capable. You do not need to become fluent. You do not need to impress anyone at a dinner party. Pick a language that means something to you specifically. Maybe it is the language your grandparents spoke and never taught you. Maybe it is the language of a country you have always wanted to visit and kept postponing. Learn 15 words this week. Learn to order coffee in it next month. Every single time your brain reaches for a word it does not have yet and has to build a new path to find one, it is doing something no crossword puzzle can fully replicate. It is forcing new connections in real time, at an age when most people have stopped asking their brain to do anything it finds difficult. If the thought of sitting alone with a workbook sounds discouraging, look for a community class instead, or find one online with a small group. There is a version of this where you are not just training your memory. You are also sitting in a room with other people, learning something equally hard, comparing mistakes, laughing at the same mispronunciations. That combination, the mental effort plus the shared struggle, tends to outlast the version people try to do completely alone at a kitchen table with no one to answer to. The third one is learning a musical instrument. And there is an old story about Socrates that fits here perfectly. By most accounts, Socrates spent the bulk of his life more interested in argument than in melody. And yet, late in his life, he reportedly took up learning to play music, sitting down as an old man to practice something a child usually starts. Not because he expected to become skilled at it, because he refused to accept that certain doors were permanently closed to him simply because of the number of years he had already lived. You will not sound good at first. Nobody does. That is not a warning. It is simply the truth, and I think it is worth saying plainly instead of pretending otherwise. But something happens when your fingers are learning where to go on a fretboard or a keyboard, while your ear is learning to catch a mistake before your hand even finishes making it. Music asks your brain to coordinate memory, movement, timing, and emotion all at once, in a way almost nothing else does. You do not need to play for anyone. You are not auditioning. You are simply giving your mind a kind of exercise most people quietly stopped giving it decades ago. You do not need to start with anything intimidating. A ukulele has 4 strings and a gentler learning curve than most people expect. A harmonica fits in a pocket and rewards you within the first afternoon. Plenty of towns have a beginner group that meets weekly specifically for adults picking up an instrument later in life, and the room is usually kinder than you imagine, because everyone in it remembers exactly what their first clumsy week sounded like. The fourth one is working with your hands outdoors, gardening specifically, though the principle applies to any hands-on craft. There was a Stoic teacher named Musonius Rufus who used to frustrate his students on purpose. He believed that talking about virtue and actually living it were two completely different exercises, and that a person who only ever discussed discipline in comfortable rooms had not actually built any. He pushed his students toward real physical labor, not because suffering was noble for its own sake, but because he believed the body and the character were trained together, not separately. Gardening puts you face to face with the single clearest lesson Stoicism ever offered: the dichotomy of control. You can prepare the soil, you can choose good seed, you can water at the right time and clear the weeds with patience. And then the weather does whatever the weather is going to do, regardless of your effort. A late frost can undo a month of careful work in a single night. Gardening teaches you, in your hands and your knees and your back, not just in your head, to do the work fully and release your grip on the outcome completely. And there is something quietly moving about tending something living, watching it grow slowly under your care, at a stage of life when you finally have the patience to actually notice the growing instead of rushing past it. You do not need a large yard for this, and you certainly do not need to be able to kneel in the dirt for an hour. A few containers on a porch or a small raised bed will teach you the exact same lesson as an acre would. Tell me in the comments if you already garden, or if this is the one on this list that quietly scares you the most. I am genuinely curious which it is. The fifth one is chess, or any structured strategy game and puzzle that makes you think several moves ahead. The Stoics had a thinker named Chrysippus, often credited with building most of the formal logical structure the school became known for. He is said to have produced an enormous body of work in his lifetime, book after book, argument after argument, refining his thinking through sheer relentless repetition rather than a handful of brilliant flashes. His mind did not stay sharp because he was simply gifted. It stayed sharp because he used it, constantly, on problems that actually required effort to solve. Chess does something a lot of casual mental activity does not. It forces you to hold multiple possibilities in your mind at once, weigh consequences several steps ahead, and sit with the discomfort of a decision that might be wrong. Find a local club, if one exists near you, because playing another person adds a layer that playing alone cannot fully replace. If chess is not for you, a daily puzzle works too, as long as it is genuinely challenging you rather than simply passing the time. The measure is not whether you win, the measure is whether the game asks something real of your thinking. I want to push back gently on one excuse I hear a lot, which is that chess feels too intimidating to start at this age. Like everyone else already knows what they are doing. Nearly every chess club in nearly every town has beginners walking in for the first time at every age imaginable. Nobody there is grading you. They showed up for the exact same reason you would, because sitting across from another mind and actually thinking is a kind of company that scrolling through a phone screen will never come close to giving you. The sixth one is painting or drawing, and this one is less about the finished picture than most people assume. Epictetus taught a concept the Stoics called attention, the deliberate discipline of actually noticing what is happening in front of you instead of drifting through it on autopilot. Most of us walk past the exact same tree, the exact same street, the exact same face, for years, without ever truly seeing any of it. We recognize it. We do not observe it. Painting and drawing force you to slow down and actually look. not glance. Look, you cannot draw the way light falls across a bowl of fruit until you have genuinely studied where the shadow begins and where it ends. That kind of attention is a muscle, and it atrophies quickly in a life filled with quick glances and constant scrolling. It does not matter if your first drawings look nothing like what you intended. That was never really the point. The point is training your mind to actually be present with what is in front of it, one honest observation at a time. If the words "I have no talent for this" just crossed your mind, notice that thought for what it is. It is not a fact about you. It is simply an old story you have repeated to yourself enough times that it started sounding true. Start with 5 minutes a day and a cheap sketchbook. Nothing more ambitious than that. Draw the coffee cup on your table exactly as it looks, not as you think it should look. In a few weeks, you will not just be drawing better, you will be seeing better. And that second part carries into every single day you are not holding a pencil at all. And the seventh one, the one I think ties every single item on this list together, is walking with intention. Seneca wrote often to his friend Lucilius about the value of getting outside and moving, not as exercise for its own sake, but as a way of letting the mind settle and think clearly. He noticed something simple that we tend to forget in a world of screens. The body and the mind were never actually separate systems. Move one and you move the other. Try this the next time you go out. Leave the phone at home, or at least in your pocket, off, walk somewhere familiar, and set yourself the quiet task of noticing 5 things you have genuinely never noticed before. A crack in a specific pavement stone. The particular sound a certain gate makes. The way the light hits a window at that exact hour. This is not exercise for your knees, although it certainly helps that too. It is exercise for a mind that has spent a lifetime rushing past its own surroundings and is finally, for the first time in decades, allowed to slow all the way down. There is a reason I saved this one for last. Every other item on this list asks you to sit down somewhere, at a desk, a table, an easel, a board. Walking is the only one that moves with you, and it is often where the thoughts from all the other 6 actually settle into place. The sentence you could not quite find for your journal last night. The vocabulary word that finally clicks. The next move on the board you have been quietly turning over. Seneca understood that thinking does not always happen best while sitting still, and if you have ever solved a problem halfway through a walk without trying to, you already know exactly what he meant. So there they are. Writing, language, music, working with your hands, strategy, art, and walking with intention. 7 different doors, and every single one of them leads to the same room. Here is the part I actually want you to remember after this video ends. It was never really about the 7 activities themselves. You could swap any one of them for something else that challenges you honestly, and the underlying lesson would hold exactly the same. The real thing being built here, quietly, session by session, is a mind that refuses to consider itself finished. A mind that keeps choosing friction on purpose, long after the world has stopped requiring it to. Cato did not become fluent in Greek before he died. He never finished. And it did not matter, because fluency was never actually the point. The daily act of sitting down and trying, at an age when everyone around him assumed trying was over, was the entire achievement by itself. Think for a moment about the version of yourself the world quietly expects at this stage. Slower, settled, done growing, done changing, mostly just passing time comfortably until the calendar runs out. That version is easy to slide into because nobody around you is going to stop you, and honestly, most people will not even notice if you do. Nobody sends a warning when a mind starts running on autopilot. It just happens gradually, the same way a fire dies down when no one bothers to add another log. And then, just as quietly, that story becomes the only one you tell yourself about who you still are. You get to write a different one. Not because it is easy, and not because every day will feel meaningful or exciting. Most days will not. Most days will simply be you, choosing the slightly harder thing again, in a quiet room, with nobody watching and nobody keeping score, but you. If all 7 of these feel like too much right now, I would gently push back on the instinct to do nothing until you have a full plan. Pick one. Just one. The one that made something in you sit up a little straighter while I described it a moment ago. Start this week, badly if you have to, and let the rest sort itself out later. If any part of this found you at the right moment today, consider staying around. This channel's Stoic origin exists for exactly this kind of conversation, ancient thinking applied honestly to the life you are actually living right now, not the one you had 30 years ago. Subscribing helps more of these reach the people who need to hear them. And if there is someone in your life standing at the edge of this exact chapter, unsure what comes next, sending this to them might matter more than you think. And if you have made it this far, I would genuinely like to know, which one of the 7 are you actually going to try first? Leave it in the comments. I read every one. The fire does not go out on its own at 60, or 70, or 80. It only goes out when you stop feeding it. So feed it something today.